Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I am glad to be joined by Alex Newman, technical founder at The Human Protocol, and Lonnie Ray, ops. Lonnie and Alex, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, my pleasure.
Pleasure.
Okay, well, first off, maybe let's go one by one. Alex, you go first. Tell the crowd a little bit kind of who you are and how you got into blockchain.
Yeah, sure. Starting off the second half, I definitely mined my first Bitcoin before there were exchanges. Didn't have the pleasure of having them robbed at the Magic the Gathering exchange that will not be named. But I've always been a big fan of the technology. In addition, since 2017, we've been really focused on kind of two-sided markets within this, especially amongst untrusted individuals, and Hcaptcha was a way to do that. But I've mostly been hanging out in the blockchain space since the beginning, ever since I was kind of a disgruntled employee who was writing code at a financial company called FactSet. Actually left to go to Silicon Valley when the whole economy was having issues. And of course, that led to Satoshi's vision and kind of everything that we've seen today.
Mm-hmm. And Lonnie, how about you?
Me, I took a pretty circular route to get here. So I was actually molecular biology, and then I was in medical school. I was Boston University School of Medicine training to be a physician. And through that route, ended up recognizing that a lot of the issues that we were really encountering that were affecting our patients had more to do with infrastructure than they did, with something that I could, really help them with as their physician. At some point, I made a spreadsheet, looking at the causes of the things that were actually impacting my patients, and recognized that infrastructure issues were near the top, like right beside cancer. So
right.
At that point, I had 8 months left of my medical degree. So I left and moved to San Francisco, and I started working in artificial intelligence and natural language processing to try and solve some of those infrastructure issues that made it very hard to transfer data, and to then use that data to actually get good quality insights into my patients. Recently sold, I was a CEO of a company called Metal, recently sold that company to a company called Ciox, which is the largest transfer of medical data within the United States. They transfer data for about a third of the hospitals in the country. And I, in my role there, had actually probably been more on the blockchain and healthcare and blockchain application skeptic side. Although I, had been, holding a little bit of Bitcoin and Ethereum for quite some time, I felt like I had not seen really mature applications of the technology in cases like Hcaptcha before. I've known Alex for about 5 years, and so it's been really exciting to see how mature and how useful the tech is. And to recognize that Hcaptcha is really, it's like the first example of what can be done with the technology. And so that's what I find so interesting, so exciting, and why I'm here.
Yeah, wow, it's really crazy. You mentioned that, when you look at the list of causes, it's cancer and then infrastructure. I mean, that really just puts things into perspective, how important, blockchain technology is, when people just think, okay, it's just a distributed ledger, who really cares? But when you see it on the list of effects, that's really wild. Now, Alex, to you, she keeps on mentioning Hcaptcha. You want to explain to us a little bit what Hcaptcha is?
Yeah, just to harp on Lonnie's previous point, and I'll go into that. One of the weird, or I guess unique aspects of Intuition Machines and now the Human Protocol is that almost all of the leadership, not only is from Silicon Valley, but has actually sold startups before, has been involved in crypto. I was more in the database space, co-founder Eli at Intuition Machines. He was actually purely on the machine learning side. And so we've always been kind of more on that side of the technology. And what was interesting is we were building up this labeling technology. Blockchain was becoming popular. We saw that we had a two-sided marketplace where all the actors didn't know each other. So we thought it was just a natural fit for crypto. So we actually I think some people kind of try to shoehorn crypto technology.
Mhm.
We went the other way, which is, oh my God, this actually solves all the problems we have. It's a lot more capital efficient to use a token rather than trying to bootstrap both sides of a two-sided marketplace by raising cash. So overall, I think that's kind of one of the other interesting things about the stories. Although all of us have been, on the Bitcoin mailing list, longtime holders, we're really more from the technology side, and we're lovers of crypto. And I think the thing that kind of unites us all in terms of what we love about crypto is the fact that it's decentralized. Is the, if you look at machine learning, especially people in my shoes, we see kind of this move to more centralization of user data, centralization of who is the nexus of machine learning. And that's extremely dangerous for society. The whole
Yeah,
notion, that the keys of the kingdom are going to be in one person's hands, I think runs anathema of the crypto ethos. So that's been really the cool part about this mission is we started off with this cool technology. We realized crypto was a great way to make that happen. But since we were focusing on giving people back their privacy and data, all the crypto people are like, yeah, we believe in that too. How do we get behind it? How do we code? How do we help make it work out? And so literally, all of the people who I've been hiring from the Human Protocol recently are people who saw this mission and just started throwing code at us. And literally, it's like, okay, you commit 3 times, perfect patches, come join the team, come help out.
Yeah.
And so it's been a real snowballing of people who are, passionate about privacy, decentralization of data, and blockchain. Sorry, you had another question though.
Yeah, well, there's 2 things that I think you mentioned and that Alex mentioned, right? So one is, as we have this kind of really snowball development of AI and AI capabilities, one of the biggest risks is that we don't find ways to communicate effectively with that AI early, frequently, often, and at scale. So I think that looking at kind of things of existential importance to society, figuring out how to have that interface and communication with deep learning is actually just, it's a very deeply important problem. And then you mentioned kind of like the importance of like blockchain in healthcare. And I want to say also, in my prior role, like I was continuously looking at proposals with blockchain in healthcare that were, buzzword A plus buzzword B. And it was trying to throw technology at a problem. And I saw so many times where people were like, we're just going to throw all the records in a blockchain. And then, we will magically be able to transfer data. But that's not how that works, because the actual hard problem there is that, okay, great, if you have the blockchain and if you have a data in a blockchain, which is there's a whole nother host of HIPAA and other issues with that. But we'll overlook that for a minute. You have the data in the blockchain, or you have a pointer, which is more likely to a private database, which at that point you're like, well, why? But we'll overlook that part. Once you have this data in the blockchain, how do you import it into a new database, which is, what is their name? What is their problem list? What medications are they taking and at what dosage? Because the hard part is actually categorizing the data. It's not putting the data in a database. Anyone can throw unstructured data in a database, and it doesn't matter if it's in a chain or what format it's really in. The hard part is then figuring out what data's there, labeling the data. And so that's the application that I think is so brilliant. And why I was excited to, help support and help be a part of ops here.
And I think so many people, and when you're talking about the tough part is actually the labeling, and people don't realize that every time when they try to log on to something and the computer says, press all the pictures, where's the stop sign, they're actually training that system, right? That's what Hcaptcha is.
Yeah, and so Hcaptcha is the flagship application. And that is one example of labeling. But there are all different categories and all different ways that we interact and train and work with machines and give feedback. And I think there's going to be a pretty big evolution just in the world in terms of how those feedback cycles work. The Human Protocol is really the infrastructure for a two-sided marketplace. It's a utility for being able to interact between humans and machines and ask questions. Hcaptcha is one type of question, right? It's several types of questions, but it's one example of how you can do that. And it is the flagship application. I believe that, over the next 10, 20, 15 years, we will see a lot more, interesting ways to interact and ask questions to and from machines. And I think it's going to be an interesting area.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alex, we're keep on mentioning this two-sided marketplace, and the human protocol. Let's say you think it's fair to say that's infrastructure. It's providing infrastructure for this. And I've seen that you guys are also working on a kind of decentralized labor market. You want to expand upon that a little bit?
Right. Well, I mean, technically Hcapcha is a decentralized labor market, right? Like these are all, it's a little bit interesting, but yeah, the human protocol can describe any interaction online between a human and a computer. We try to be very careful not to talk about future applications too much. We talk about what we're excited about. And so one of the things that I'm excited about in that space, that a lot of people are talking about labeling for machine learning, either reinforcement or supervised learning, but there are just a lot of actions that human beings have to take in this ritualized format. It has to be documented online, that extend throughout our whole life. Everything from how banking records work. I don't want to, once again, I don't want to get too much into future applications, but pretty much everything there are so many times where humans are interacting with robots in this ritualistic or specific way. But Captcha is a very interesting one. So when we first started this project, it was actually pre the Captcha. We had organized all of the major work pools online to solve some of the largest data labeling problems that our big customers needed. And so we ended up making kind of like a poor man's Captcha, just because these existing labor pools online, they don't necessarily, they're not perfectly trusted. Not all of them have the same training. And so what we would do is we would send the same question out to multiple labor pools and really consensus the answer across them. And that iterative consensus method is kind of one of the key parts of the Captcha product. But what we learned while using Captcha as a data set is that it has significantly less different biases than trained users. So what does that mean? So one of the examples that I bring up to people that we discover kind of the hard way is what happens when you ask people whether or not something is a long sleeve shirt. Well, it turns out what country you ask them from is going to determine whether or not that shirt is short, medium length, or long length, which I found to be incredibly fascinating. It turns out that most of these questions, which we believe have surefire answers, really only have probabilities. And those probabilities are social. Captcha can give you a light onto those that you really can't get from a trained staff. In addition, all the stuff around any biases they might have due to their training or previous experiences, that all goes away. It's like asking a question across the whole world. In addition, unlike some other Captcha products, we really are worldwide. We work in China. We work in so many different countries.
Individuals who complete puzzles across the world.
Yeah, I think I read it was like 19% of all the internet's data is behind Captcha, right? Something like that.
What we say is about 14% is currently being defended by Hcapcha.
Yeah, at least.
And
yeah.
I think that's the beauty of it. You said defended, and I think that's the genius of this whole thing, that it's not only, okay, we have this problem we have to solve, which is labeling and training the machine, but it's also serving the purpose of defense and action. It's like a dual purpose. It's genius. Who's the one who thought of this?
It's greater than that. So it's even better than that. So first of all, let's talk about the defenses, right? So the reality is the internet doesn't work without Captcha. If we were to, if our content distribution networks were to remove the Captcha protection, then websites and the internet would be continuously under attack. The internet wouldn't work. So that's kind of the first level. We need it just to get the internet to work, right? And then there's the second level where users are protecting content. They're protecting their own website from bots that may be crawling. So those are the protection aspects, right? What's interesting is also consider we're a privacy-centric Captcha that is rewarding users for providing us with that data. And in addition, that data product is not something that we hoard. No, that is monetized on chain and anyone can produce that. So, so just to go back to a previous point, if privacy and decentralization are two sides of the same coin, if we take control of our data, and so these huge companies don't get to decide what data we have necessarily, that means that not only have we given ourselves more privacy, but we've decentralized access to this data while protecting the user. So it's really, there's all sorts of beneficial things going on just in the Captcha model. But even beyond that, as soon as you're starting to say, hey, look, we're privacy protective, we're going to pay you for the data that you provide, you're going to decide what data you contribute, not me. It completely changes the world, right? It takes all the power from these large human beings or these large companies, and it shoves it back into the user and the websites that are deriving the content. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a type of protection, that we can't even describe. One of the things that Lonnie and I talk a lot about is the emotional protection of Captcha. Imagine a world where in the town square, one ruffian could literally just pretend to be 10,000 people all screaming, what I might find hateful, illogical political speak, right? And now I'm convinced, like, oh, maybe I've got it wrong. Everyone around me believes this thing. Maybe I'm the crazy one. That's how human beings are. And so Captcha is also provides a very important role and not only preventing the creation of these sock puppet accounts, but the 1,000 sock puppet accounts all talking at the same time under the work of one person gives someone, a disproportionate effect on society. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely this protection aspect, but I think the key thing for people to remember is that this protection is also the other side of the decentralization privacy coin, which is really all about people having control over their money, people having control of their own lives, and people having control over their nation.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned, this idea that, and especially Lonnie too, when you're talking about big data and machine learning, and Alex, you mentioned how you could ask the same question that you think would have an objective answer, but it doesn't. It's totally subjective, long sleeve shirt or whatever. Do you think if we're already having Captcha protecting the logging on to our accounts, one of the biggest frustrations and the biggest weak points in today's internet is passwords. Do you think that once these models get to be accurate enough that Captcha, our subjective Captcha answers could replace our passwords, which are the weak links to our content?
So I think
leveling of this for a sec. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So two things. One, as we're talking, what we're really talking to you about is an excitement around a field, right? So I want to clarify also, we're talking about how we see the field that we play in evolving, as opposed to specific things that we think that we may or may not do. But it's an excitement because, the world is going to change as AI evolves, and you have things, that you see like, like Neuralink, right? It's an example of how people are trying to communicate with AI. Now, and the importance thereof and of doing that in a timely manner. What I like so much about Hcaptcha and Human Protocol is that this is an infrastructure for scalably interacting with AI. That is at its heart what it is. Hcaptcha is one example. It's really great for a variety of use cases. There's a lot that can be learned and gleaned from that. There are certainly experiments in the world that are talking about replacing passwords with various AI solutions. Whether or not that is an area that we will foray into is dependent on many variables. And what I would also say is that I have seen both sides of that argument in terms of the evolution of passwords and password protection. So I don't necessarily want to comment on specific things that we think that we would do, but I am excited to kind of provide an educational lens or a conversational lens, because what we've talked about is that the audience really, they're, you know, really smart people who are looking to understand a field. And so that's, you know, I think that's such an exciting audience to be able to communicate with, because I think that this field and the field of AI, and specifically the field of AI human interfaces, is a rapidly evolving, deeply important area. And one that I think is going to see a lot of change in the future. I don't know if Alex has a more specific answer.
Yeah,
But I did want to
no,
just
that's
clarify
great. That's great. Just dovetailing on that, because Hcaptcha is privacy protecting, we don't keep data on anyone who's not a bot long term. So it'd be difficult for us to incorporate any type of system like that into Hcaptcha, because we don't want to store people's fingerprints. We don't want to store pictures. We don't want to store anything about people, right? We want to be as privacy preserving as we can in that regard. So in terms of Hcaptcha, unfortunately, it's not really an option. But you know, you can do any interaction between a human and a robot can be derived in the human protocol. So you could kind of talk about any type of interactions that you would want, collect any data you would want under these types of models. The foundation really believes in this privacy goal. So in terms of the applications that we're developing, they're really focused along that. But the human protocol is very flexible. I'd recommend people checking out you know, github.com Hcaptcha HMT escrow, and they can really see that realistically any kind of human computer interaction can be described in that to create a variety of applications. It's not one that we've looked at, to be honest, though, but just off the top of the head, I do think it's just technically difficult with Hcaptcha with our privacy model.
So if you're not storing any private information, or you're minimizing any private information that exists in the system, it's very hard to identify an individual human. What I would add to just what Alex has said, you know, the system itself and the infrastructure itself, what that describes is essentially a market and an order book. So it's a way of creating this market and order book where you're able to describe a task, break those tasks down into component pieces or component learning. So for example, if you have a hierarchical task, so the easy example is scan a page. That breaks down to individual words, that breaks down to individual letters, and trying to understand what that says. That's like a very easy example. If you're talking about something like complex learning or complex understanding, maybe you have a legal document, and beyond, you know, above scan the page. So once you have scanned the page, now you're talking about things like sentence structure or, you know, meaning, right? And understanding meaning or being able to summarize. And those are things that you see companies like OpenAI or, you know, algorithms like that working on with a combination of semi-supervised and reinforcement learning. So if you're looking at that, really the infrastructure itself, though, is a way of breaking down, distributing tasks, creating a market for those tasks based on, you know, difficulty, who can pick them up, labor pools, et cetera, creating a system where an oracle is just something that, you know, gathers off blockchain information, passes it to the blockchain, where that oracle is able to collect data and then report that back. And then that smart contract is able to say, okay, this transaction was completed and we're going to complete that payment. And then for users who have been KYC'd and are in regions where they're allowed, then they could, you know, check out. That way today with Hcaptcha, that's all transferred and checked out via PayPal. But it really is outgrowing that system. So that's a bit of information just in terms of the infrastructure layer, which is really where we're focused. So I think what Alex is really alluding to is that kind of decomposition of tasks, order book, transaction, smart contract, infrastructure, you know, it is technically possible to build other applications that are a task decomposition and an order book. And that code is all, that code, that HMT escrow is all available. That's on GitHub today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that sounds so exciting, because this basically this idea of this infrastructure that's enabling and recording and potentially monetizing these interactions between humans and AI. I think it's important, especially now when a lot of people, for a variety of reasons, are afraid. When they think of AI, they're afraid of this future where AI takes over their jobs, and AI is kind of this oncoming doom. I personally think that's an unfair assumption, because when you look at history, with the growth of technology throughout human history, going back thousands of years, new technology comes, people are afraid of it, and it takes certain jobs, but it creates others. So do you see potentially this infrastructure enabling the future where humans are actually, where humans are able to, to now have a new source of income? Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think the conversation that AI personnel have with each other is very difficult than the conversation we have with the public, often about these subjects. I was talking to some colleagues, some from China, some from India here in the United States. The US and Western folks were proposing that a certain type of technology and machine learning not be used. I think it was around facial identification for public safety. And our Chinese colleagues said, oh, but this is saving so much lives, reducing drunk driving. And one of my Indian colleagues actually broke down in tears because she did have a family loss due to that reason. And it was really interesting. And I think, the same goes with crypto, which is, here in the West, there's just so much great things going on. In other parts of the world, in many ways, they're struggling to get some of the same things we have. Now, in some ways they're ahead, but, and so I think that, in terms of how this technology is adopted by society, I think it's very important that we take a global view. Take a Bitcoin. I talk to people in the United States and they're like, why do I care about stable coins or Bitcoins? And I'm like, look, dude, you're supported by the American banking system. They print dollars in those banks. The rest of the world just doesn't have the same financial rails that we have. This is very important to them. Same thing's going on with ML, where in the West, I hate to describe it this way, we have the luxury to pick and choose a lot more than other people. That being said, I and many other people in ML are very focused on how this technology will be safe from the point of view of jobs, from the point of view of, I was talking to some defense contractors that are working on a fully automated kill chain, and not for my company, just literally just talking to some people online, in like a chat room. There are all these kind of mega things happening in ML. And from my point of view, the thing which is going to decide whether or not it's safe isn't really about whether or not the technology is going to be created. Technology is going to happen, right? The question is it democratized? Is it even, is it one small group of people that are going to have all this power over all of us? Or is it going to be the type of thing where every company, every individual, every research in the world is going to have access to this utility of data? Now, that being said, on the jobs issue, when human beings put on eyeglasses, they are cyborgs. Eyeglasses are technology that we don't view as technology. We take it for granted. Lonnie just said, should we bring up this chess analogy to explain this? And what she's talking about is, first, humans were the only people playing chess. Computer came in and beat Kasparov. Now the cyborgs are cleaning up on the computers. And when I say cyborgs, that's human-computer team.
When you have a human-computer pair, even a moderate chess player, that human-computer pair beats the expert every time.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is it's paired. And I think, Alex is, one of the things that Alex is saying, it's a similar thing that we've heard, people like Elon Musk talk about, that one of his biggest existential fears is that we will not have enough interfaces for humans and machines to communicate as AI evolves. And just to summarize and kind of, take a pointer to that, I think that what Alex is saying is that having a democratized utility for communication between humans and machines is essential. It is essential to making sure that we have access broadly to both the technology and to the communication window into the technology, because the technology is being developed, but it is, frequently being developed in an enclave, in an area that is separate from us. And so what I love about this technology, and if you look at just Hcaptcha, over 100 million users are completing puzzles every month. And that is, as far as, my excitement, I see that as a wonderful, lovely beginning to what can happen or what could happen. If you look at the human-computer pairs, they are often, outperforming. For example, you may have autopilot on a plane, but you don't really want to remove the pilot. You like having that combination, right? That combination is where we provide strength. Otherwise, the Boeing situation would have been a lot worse, right?
Right.
So that combination of that human-computer strength. And also, there used to be an entrepreneur, her name was Layla Jana, and she passed away, but she had a company called Answerest. And Answerest's entire premise was that data labeling is a new blue-collar job category. It's actually an area, it's a great equalizer for people who have not had jobs access to create an entire level of jobs access. But beyond that, if you're looking at market rates for data labeling and the ability to create so for example, the market rate for a radiologist may be higher than the market rate for a layperson. But there are, I think, blue collar jobs in data labeling, white collar jobs in data labeling, executive or expert jobs in data labeling. And when you look at the way that performance that we see, it's actually trending in this direction of, as Alex says, the cyborg. It's that combination that we know is actually really strong, whether that's, the sci-fi, implant, or whether it's something that is, happens through the thing that we don't even consider. We are all already cyborgs. Our phones are extensions of us, right? Every time you look up Wikipedia, you're a cyborg, right? That's not stored in your head, but it is information that is accessible to you and shapes how you behave, who you are, and how effective you are as a human.
So that technology needs to be democratized. That everyone, I'm also, let me just go back into the question, Lad. Do we want a world where, let's say, only 0.1% of people have access to these cyborg type things? Do we want a world where only 0.1, a very small amount of people can take? No, that doesn't sound fun. We want a world where we can all take advantage of this, grow together with machines, and in my utopian world, maybe even become friends with them when they become smart enough. I mean, that's I think the world that Elon Musk is pushing for. We would love for Tesla to join the Human Foundation. We love that. But I think that overall, going back to what I think you were saying, and we're kind of agreeing with you, is that this technology is coming. Human beings haven't, in this competitive world, it's not really going away. So the question is, how do we do it safely? I think that the academics, they want to, hold on. Yeah. So hold on one sec, guys.
No problem. Lonnie, to you, my question is this. When we're talking about, machine learning and these big data sets, is blockchain necessary? I mean, machine learning, it seems learning works just fine as is without a blockchain infrastructure being put in there. What is the blockchain actually adding to this equation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's so important. So I think if you think about things like PayPal works great in the United States, but it doesn't work everywhere. And also when you're doing really high volumes of settlement, there ends up being, issue. I think that really one of the applications that I've seen where blockchain is just so effective and so interesting is distributed two-sided marketplace, right? So it's actually that marketplace function. I've said for years on the record that I was constantly seeing people trying to blockchain times AI or blockchain, and it's like buzzword multiplication, right? But when you look at it, if you're looking at a system for specifically dividing tasks, distributing tasks. And then one of the other key pieces is this smart contract. So I've worked with these, data labeling companies for many years. And as contractors, often in a different country, what can happen is that they'll get a job, they'll be on a 60-day payment schedule. And then the company that does it delays and delays and delays. And those people depend on that payment. Right? When they choose one job over another job, those individuals actually depend on being paid on time, but frequently they're the last party to be paid. if a company has any kind of a struggle. So having a smart contract, having that codified, that if I complete this job, then I will get paid this much in a timely fashion, and I know how much that is, and I know my payment schedule, that is game changing for these companies, because it is an equalizer, because it's actually very hard for these companies to come back and say, hey, you know, knocking on the door of a US company, you guys are late paying me. I'm a contractor. I'm, you know, in another country. I need you guys to pay me. My family depends on it. You know, maybe that company has hired additional people, and that delay is causing them to have to manage their staff. So I think that two-sided marketplace function between parties that may not know or trust one another. And also, one of the biggest limitations to the next breakthrough in AI is the scale of data labeling. There's even all of these companies that are creating synthetic data just to try and increase the volume of available data. So whether it's like, you know, there's an open source piece of code called Synthia, there's a private company called Syntegra. These are companies that are literally aimed at making synthetically labeled data because there's just not enough. So if you're making that access more, if you're increasing that access, if you're creating a pipeline, if you're creating a marketplace, if you're creating a way where you can have these contracts that are so much easier than trying to execute like an agreement with one of these labeling companies, or even just with an individual person, because maybe what you're looking for is to check your bias. Maybe you have an algorithm that's already run and you're trying to see, wait a minute, if I ask people all over, did I do a good job, right? And increasing that communication and awareness, I think it's one of the things that I've seen. And as someone who is like on the record continuously saying, you know, blockchain is just not as mature, you know, I see a lot of proposals, a lot of white papers where I read it and it's like, that is great sci-fi. Like, that's so cool. I love that book, right? But for something for me to invest my time, my energy, and my excitement into something, it actually took a very different standard, right? And in this case, this is a case that I have seen where the blockchain is solving a problem. Hcaptcha outgrew traditional payment systems. There were limitations. Those limitations exist in contracting, they exist in payments, they exist in timely payments, they exist in the trust between parties that don't know one another. If you're looking at how well, you know, certain technologies work for payments and you're using the United States as a standard, that is a great privileged position to be in. You know, it doesn't work that way everywhere. So, you know, those are things that I think that this technology is directly addressing for very good reason. It's very interesting. And you know, and that's why I think it's different than a lot of what I've seen previously.
One small thing, just dovetailing on something Lonnie said. So currently we're using PayPal. She points out we've reached some limitations. US people are always like, what's wrong with PayPal? I think PayPal's great. The fact they're taking Bitcoin, oh my God, it's killer, you know? Many of my employees who work for me cannot receive PayPal legally. They live in jurisdictions where PayPal is just not even an option. That's just people who work for me. So we are constantly getting people say, when token, because they really like crypto. Like this goes back to in the Western world, people don't, I mean, some people get this, but many people don't understand why crypto. In the rest of the world, this isn't a question. Like if you go to the rest of the world where the, you know, currencies are up and down, you know, there may be restrictions about how I can pay people. You know, crypto solves these enormous problems. And so I think this is one of the reasons why Silicon Valley has had a bit of a problem playing in that space, is because America has the greatest financial system in the world. We literally print our reserve currencies in our banks. Like when you go to Wells Fargo and take out a loan, they printed that money right then and there. Not from the Federal Reserve, not from the government. They just did it right there. No one around the world can do that. No other banks can do that. Only American commercial banks. So we have the greatest financial system, and we're holding it above everyone else. Crypto decentralizes that, brings everyone to the same level, provides transparency. Here in the US, when we do eBay, it's mostly on ratings. The ratings are enough, right? But as soon as you go international, now you're talking escrow, all of those types of things. Right. So it's just one of those things where I don't want to say we live in a bubble, but we live in a bubble. And so we're so confused when the rest of the world who doesn't live in our bubble has to build tools that aren't built on trust. PayPal, the fact that eBay can use ratings is because trust is all you need. But that trust doesn't exist across the world. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the important thing to consider, is that, you know, why crypto? For most people now, it's becoming table stakes. Like, this is just the way they want to interact with the financial system.
Mm-hmm. And as we're nearing the end of our interview and our talk here, you know, this is our Halloween themed conference. And so I've been asking every single interviewee to tell one scary story they have, one scary crypto or blockchain story, whatever it may be. So Alex, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I was attempting to transfer some Bitcoin, and it turns out that I sent it back and forth, and but I actually suffered like a pretty gnarly man-in-the-middle phishing attack, and you know, lost that month's and a half salary. And so, you know, I was worried that my whole computer was hacked, that all of that was going away. You know, you know, it turns out someone just replaced some numbers on a web page. So yeah, I would say so far that's the scariest crypto story. Turns out it was a friend man-in-the-middling me, so I actually got the tokens back about 3 months later, which was pretty amazing.
Was it a prank? Was it a prank by your friend?
It was a prank. It was a prank. Yeah, that's right. And the reason why they were able to man in the middle is because they were in the same room. And yeah, so it was, you know, like, not something that was going to break the bank, but, you know, you get something like that happen to you, you're like, what else is hacked, you know? So yeah, I think that's my scary story.
Yeah. Lonnie, how about you? Do you have a scary crypto or blockchain story?
Yeah, I would say my scariest story was probably that, you know, there was a point at which I thought I had lost one of my, I had converted over to using a hard wallet, you know, a physical wallet, and I thought I lost both the physical wallet and the restoration keys.
Oh, no.
So, and that was, you know, I had, you know, been lucky enough to have put, you know, just a little bit away, even when I was like a med student, right? So, you know, but you know, it was, I think, still pretty early days, and had, you know, put some things away, and then at some point had transferred over to utilizing, you know, better standards, better practices, and thought that I lost those better standards and better practices because I had been moving around a lot after being in med school. You know, and at one point in time, all of my belongings were like essentially in a storage unit, and I had, like, you know, 2 bins of stuff with me while I was moving around San Francisco to like rentals, because I still hadn't gotten the approval to actually have a longer leave of absence from medical school before I just eventually, you know, left, right? So I think that was, you know, it was this kind of like being, you know, bouncing between rooms and places and thinking that I had like lost the savings that I had put away for myself. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's been so lovely to sit down and talk to you and talk more on the kind of like theory and interest and passion side. And to clarify yet again that, you know, the conversation that we're having here today is not so much specific implementation. It's not so much specific things that we will do, we would build, or we could build. It's about a field, right? It's about an entire field that is rapidly changing. Why that field is interesting, and why, you know, people like Alex and myself have dedicated time and energy into that field and feel like it's something so important for the world. And so I do just want to like give that disclaimer, clarify, make sure that we're talking about that. You know, because I think we have shared a little bit more about, you know, our vision and our excitement today, and we will, you know, it may not necessarily be us doing all of these things, but we do believe that these are things that will happen in the world.
Well, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time, because even those were some scary stories you guys said. I think you guys maybe demystified some of the fears surrounding AI and machine learning that a lot of our viewers may have. So I appreciate you guys taking the time and the amazing work that you guys are doing in this field. Alex and Lonnie, thank you so much for joining us. And for all of our viewers here at Reimagine 2020, thanks for joining.